Uh, Good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Robertson, and I want to welcome you to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. I want to say that I'm very happy to see such a wonderful turnout this close to Christmas. I want to thank you all for coming to listen and learn about the very grave crisis of enforced disappearances that are happening in the region. I'm a board member of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. Before I get started, I want to, first of all, just remind people that there is an event tomorrow, tomorrow evening. As many of you may know, the government has proposed a far-reaching marriage equality law that may move forward in the parliament as early as tomorrow. And there is going to be a very high-profile expert panel tomorrow evening at the Foreign Correspondents Club. It's going to include representatives. I'm not going to cover everybody's name, but we're going to have representatives, members of parliaments from the Pheu Thai Party, the ruling party, from the opposition Move Forward Party. We'll have someone from the International Human Rights Division of the Ministry of Justice. We'll have someone from the NGO community, and we'll actually have several people from the civil society, and will be moderated by another member of the civil society. The details are on our website at fccthai.com, and I encourage you to look there, and I encourage you to come tomorrow. Today we're going to be talking about the very grave situation of enforced disappearances in Laos, Thailand, and Southeast Asia. On December 15, 2012, civil society leader and Magsaysay Award winner Sombath Somphone was stopped at a police checkpoint in downtown Vientiane on his way home to dinner with his wife. As seen in police CCTV footage, which was obtained by his wife, Shui Meng, who we'll hear from soon, men took him into the checkpoint and then very soon escorted him out to another car, and he was driven away, and he has not been seen since. There has been an extremely active Lao government cover-up, which has frustrated the efforts of friends, family, colleagues, diplomats, UN agencies and officials, and others across the region to try to find out what has happened to Sombath. Where is Sombath? That has been the perennial call. Bring Sombath home, return him safely to his family. And we have Laos, of course, taking over the chairmanship of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations at the end of this month, on January 1st. As that happens, we still face a plague of enforced disappearances and transnational repression and violence against political opponents. It's spread both in Laos as well as across much of the Mekong subregion and Southeast Asia, raising some very serious fundamental questions of what needs to be done to protect civil society and political opposition activists from rights abusing enforced disappearances, and also, ideally, to hold accountable for those responsible. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We've got Lao activists who have gone missing here in Thailand. We've had also in Cambodia. We've had political activists these are the political activists who fled the 2014 coup. We've had dozens of other enforced disappearances in Thailand and elsewhere. So what needs to be done? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And how can concerned people, media, civil society, persons like yourselves, help to try to resolve this problem? This has all been made possible with the generous support of the Embassy of the Netherlands in Bangkok. And so before we get started with the panel, I want to ask the Deputy Ambassador, Miriam Otto, to come up and say a few words. Yeah, there we go. Swap it out.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, FCCT, for giving me the opportunity to express a very strong and heartfelt thank you to everyone who has found the time and made the effort to be here today for a tough and sad and very important topic. I don't want to take too much of your time. It's far more important to listen to our experienced and knowledgeable and very courageous panelists But very briefly, on behalf of the Netherlands, I would just like to emphasize the importance of keeping these meetings going, like today, to show that even when days and weeks and months and years and decades unfortunately pass, we will not forget about Sombath or Somchai and the many other human rights defenders who disappear in this region, or who are fearing and actually running that risk still today. So we will do our best to keep these enforced disappearances on the international agenda, as they unfortunately remain a very pressing issue in this region, and especially in Laos, which indeed will take up the chairmanship in ASEAN from January. So thanks again to everybody here who joins us in trying to help stop enforced disappearances, and especially to our distinguished and brave panelists. You're the ones who know this issue best, and we're all looking forward to hearing and learning from your experiences. So with no further ado, back over to you, Phil. Let's start the panel discussions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Miriam. And again, thank you to the Dutch Embassy for your support. So now I'm going to ask the panel to come up. We have 4 panelists, and we have Shui Meng, who's on the line from Vientiane. But let me ask the people who are here in the club with us today to please come on up. Okay. So, first of all, we're going to hear from Shui Meng, who's joining us from Vientiane. She's on the screen here. She is the wife of Sombath Somphone. She's the author of a fantastic and penetrating book, The Silencing of a Laotian Son, The Life, Work, and Enforced Disappearance of Sombath Somphone. She was also with UNICEF for many years, including leading UNICEF in Laos. So I want to turn the stage over to Shui Meng, and Shui Meng, the floor is yours. Hold it, you're muted, I think. Can someone unmute Shui Meng, please?
Yes.
Oh, there
yes,
you are. We can hear you now.
Yeah. I think it's very dark. Maybe I should switch on the light. Maybe it will be better.
No, we can see you fine.
Okay, fine.
We can see you fine. Yeah, no, you're fine. No problem at all.
Okay, so first, good evening to everybody, and thank you, Phil, and to FCCT for continuing to organize panels related to human rights violations in the region. This December 2023 is also the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it is also the 11th anniversary of my husband Sombath Somphone's abduction in Vientiane. Phil has already kind of outlined what happened to Sombath. He was caught on the police CCTV footages, which recorded clearly how he was being abducted by uniformed personnel at a police checkpoint in the center of Vientiane. And up to now, 11 years later, I have not heard any report about this investigation, despite the fact that the Lao authorities have reassured anybody asking about Sombath that they are continuing to investigate the case, as well as keeping me and the family updated about what happened. These are obviously lies. In fact, they have repeated the lies so often that I am even surprised that they continued such a sham without showing any sign of embarrassment. On reflection, I think I'm not surprised that it is the nature of such authoritarian governments, including that of Laos, to act with impunity and disregard of international standards, since standards of governance such as rule of law, transparency, human rights have little real meaning in such regimes and in Laos. I will not talk specifically so much about Sombath's case, despite the fact that it continues to be an emotional drain to me and to the family for the past 11 years. And also his case is made known and circulated widely. And for those who are interested to learn more, there is a well-known documentary called The Disappearance of Sombath Somphone, which is available and is on YouTube for all those who want to know in detail what had happened or have not read about the case. Instead, I will use the time now to talk about human rights in Laos and how the Lao authorities have very strategically used rights violations to target specific human rights defenders and use such tactics to instill fear and thereby ensure subservience and silence in the general population. Just a quick update on the human rights situation in Laos. For those people who have followed human rights situation in the region, many often say there are not many reports of human rights violations in Laos, not like in some other countries in the region where such reports are rife, and such as disappearance, incarceration, or arrest. And they are regularly reported in the press, such as incidents in Myanmar and in Vietnam. But we hear very little about such violations in Laos. The reason why we do not hear much news about human rights violations in Laos is because there's no free media in Laos. And there are very few news agencies and international reporters allowed into the country. So many things that happen inside Laos do not get into the news. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, the Lao government is very strategic, and its human rights violations are not random. The government uses human rights violations mostly to target specific individuals to achieve the greatest impact. It is important to note that most of the victims of human rights violations are not rabble-rousers or political dissidents. They are ordinary citizens trying through their work to help make the country a better place or to help improve the livelihoods of the members in the community. And because of their work, they have become well known and respected in the community. I will just quickly give three very well-known examples. The first example is, of course, Sombath Somphone, which you have already heard. Sombath was targeted and disappeared on 15 December 2012. He was targeted because he was well known as a community development leader, showing in practical ways how to engage community members in sustainable development and people-centered development activities. And because of his work over more than 30 years, he had gained a very large following, especially among the young people. Sombath's disappearance is clearly to stop him from gaining more following as someone who can champion a sustainable development alternative counter to the government's development agenda of encouraging foreign investments in large-scale infrastructure projects like dam building and clearing of land and taking over large land concessions to develop agri-forestry, such as growing of rubber plantations and cassava, which are harmful to the environment and the livelihoods of the local communities. This, I believe, is the reason why Sombath was abducted. I give another example. The second example is the case of Hue Heng Sayaburi, commonly known as Mui. Mui was arrested in 2019 and was sentenced to 5 years in prison for her use of social media to highlight the government's slow response to providing assistance to the victims of the Say Bien and Say Nam Noi dam collapse in Attapur. Prior to her arrest, Mui was also gaining a large following on social media through her exposure of official corruption and misuse of power, such as sale of official positions in public service jobs and the protection of local companies who unjustly and arbitrarily collect road tolls from the public. It is clear that Mui's growing popularity and following in social media is the main cause for her disappearance. It is the Lao government's way to warn other young Lao not to step out of line and use social media to highlight government's abuse and misconduct. Otherwise, they will face the same fate as Mui. Today, Mui still languishes in jail. The third example is the attempted killing of Jack, whose real name is Anusa Longsupom, on 30th of April this year. Again, CCTV footages showed Jack being shot point blank in the face and chest several times. So who is Jack and why was he targeted? Jack is just a 25-year-old ordinary young Lao blogger who hosted a Facebook page. Jack's sin was to blog about corrupt practices of Chinese companies that have disregarded Laos' environmental laws and controls and have caused pollution of waterways and streams and caused a lot of difficulties in local communities who depended on such streams for their livelihoods. After the shooting, a few of Jack's associates reportedly said that this shooting was the act of undercover police officers. He was sent to kill Jack because of his open criticisms and increasing and growing following among young Lao who look up to him and look to his Facebook page for news about what's happening in their own communities and country. And when the authorities were confronted to explain what caused Jack's shooting, they explained that the shooting was caused probably by a personal or business dispute. This was exactly what the Lao authorities have also said about Sombath's abduction 11 years ago. So it is nothing more than a cover-up of official abuse of power. And in both Sombath's abduction and Jack's shooting, none of the perpetrators have been caught for their crime. They have remained to this day unresolved cases. From the 3 cases cited above, we see a clear pattern that human rights violations like enforced disappearances, blatant incarcerations, and assassinations are meant to silence those individuals in Laos who have become too well known for their work or for criticisms against official corruption and abuse. These individuals, while not having any political agenda to destabilize or undermine the power of the state, are in the eyes of the authoritarian regime, they are considered as people who need to be put away, to set an example to the public and to what could happen to others if they step out of line. And in all these cases, whenever this happens, a strong sense of fear is spread within the entire Lao community and society. And a pall of silence grips the entire population. It is a very effective scare tactic that works in Laos, given the subservient nature of the people and the lack of any avenue for the victims' families to seek justice. Now, these three cases are some of the more well-known cases, but there are other cases which are just as blatant and just as unjust. I will talk about some other abuses commonly happening now that continues to happen and is not even reported. There have been many violations of human rights, especially targeted against ethnic minorities and Christian minority communities. This perpetuation of human rights abuses are not reported. And if they are reported, they are quickly silenced. Most of the perpetrators of such abuses are local officials. And when they are reported to the central government takes no action to stop local officials from such violations. Apart from this, there are also more and more blatant criminal activities at the border areas bordering Myanmar and China. In these areas, there is rampant increase of human trafficking of poor Lao or even foreigners tricked into working in casinos or in other illegal businesses operating in concessions given mainly to Chinese investors. It takes place and gets reported occasionally, but nothing is done to stop them. And what do the Lao people do about such violations? The Lao people know about many of such violations. Even though there may be no news reports, this is such a small country, and the news of violations travel fast within and outside the community. Among older Lao people, there is a sense of resignation and a sense of acceptance that they can do little or nothing about the situation. And the best way to survive is to keep out of trouble and not to talk about such abuses openly. The young people are, however, taking a slightly different tactic. The young, because they have access to the internet and social media, know more about what is happening in their communities. And they are quietly sharing such information among themselves in small groups and in close networks, knowing that if they become well-known, they too may suffer the fate of Moi or Jack. Many of these young people are unhappy about the situation, but they know that any involvement could endanger their own lives and the lives of their families. So what do? Many of these young people have now expressed that they actually don't see much future for them in a country, especially when they do not come from rich or powerful families. Quite a number of young people have in recent years chosen to protest with their feet by leaving the country, to look for work or study opportunities outside of Laos. Many go to Thailand or even beyond, first to find work and then to stay in those countries if they can. And given the current bad economic situation inside Laos, seeking work outside the country is the only real option for many young people. Such ways of escape, especially by the young of Laos, does not bode well for the future of the development of the country, as it removes the most dynamic segment of Laos population, who instead of staying to build a future for themselves and for their families inside the country, they have decided to leave. For the Lao authorities, such actions by the young are actually not seen as a bad thing. For them, it is seen as a way of removing the more troublesome elements of the population from the country. Also, they see it as an easy way to solve some of the economic pressures confronting the country, where job creation poses greater and greater difficulties during these economic pressing times. So where does all this leave Laos? And where does it leave those who are really concerned about the future of the country? The options are obviously limited, given the continued repressive climate inside the country, where power remains highly concentrated in the hands of few families and the community and the military. So what is the role of international development agencies and human rights organizations? In the case of Laos, I feel that there is little option left but to continue to rely on international advocacy and international condemnation whenever cases of human rights violations are made known. Even though such international condemnation and intercession through the UN system and other human rights organizations and the international media have not actually helped to resolve any of the most blatant cases of human rights violations in Laos. However, they need to continue. This is because such actions will at least let the Lao authorities know that their rights violations and injustice are known by the global community, and the Lao are expected to take actions against known cases of human rights violations, such as that of Sombath, Mui, and Jack, and others. Such international condemnation also caused some degree of discomfort to the Lao officials, and they are reminded time and time again of the blemish to their international standing and image each time they meet at international human rights events. And what of the individual? What kind of response at a personal level can we, victims like myself, take about the situation? For me, I will continue the struggle, no matter how long it would take or how small my voice is, to seek justice and truth for Sombath and other victims of human rights violations. For me, to remain silent and not to continue to speak out on Sombath's case and other cases is not an option. I must be the voice of the voiceless and stand up for truth and justice. I will also continue to work together in unity with the community of human rights defenders in the region and globally to bring such change wherever possible and educate the young about human rights and how to have courage to become human rights defenders on their own. One voice may be weak, but when that one voice can lead to a chorus of voices, our demands will be heard eventually. I must keep up this hope for a better future for my family, for Sombath, and for Laos. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you very much, Shui Meng. Very heartfelt, very comprehensive. We greatly appreciate it. Next, we're going to hear from Emily Palami Pratichit, who is the founder and executive director of the Manushya Foundation. She's an expert on civil society and the ongoing crackdown in Laos and across Southeast Asia. She's also the former Asia Regional Director of UPR Info, which works on the UPR process at the UN Human Rights Council, and is a former Human Rights and Advocacy Officer with the United Nations Development Program. So, Emily, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for hosting this very important conversation about the human rights situation in Laos, and in particular enforced disappearance, and the new trend that we've been seeing in the past few years related to transnational repression. So I think it's really important for us to be here and have a specific discussion about Laos and on Laos, because this doesn't happen often. Most of the time when we talk about the human rights situation in Southeast Asia, or in Asia in general, we talk about China, we talk about what's happening in Thailand, we talk about Myanmar, but very little is said about Laos. So thank you so much for having this discussion. My name is Emily Palami Pratichit. Thank you for the introduction. I'm a former Lao political refugee, so working on Laos is very, very important for me, and it's part of why I'm doing this work. The human rights situation in Laos is very critical and in a very, very bad state. According to Freedom of the World report by Freedom House, Laos is considered a not free country. And as we know, Laos is a very close country where authoritarianism is guiding the country policy with its one-state political party. And as Shui Meng was saying, this year we're celebrating the 75th year of the UDHR. But seriously, when you look at the situation globally and in particular in Laos, there's little to celebrate when you come to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We've seen the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of inequality, and in particular in Laos, with a high rate of inflation and how the economic direction that the country is taking. We see the impoverishment of the population, and we see rich people getting richer. So we see the country that is being led with one political party, few rich families in the country, and human rights defenders who are trying to speak the truth to power, facing attacks, facing repression, facing intimidation, enforced disappearance, attempt killing, like in the case of Jack. So what I would like to share with you is the situation inside Laos, but also outside Laos, and also who we are talking about, where we are talking about human rights defenders. I think Shui Meng gave us a very good overview of key cases and of the situation and what is at stake in Laos. What I would like to share with you is who are those people who are actually fighting for human rights in Laos. Most of the time, they are very normal people. They are not human rights defenders or human rights activists to start with. They are very normal citizens. In the case of Lao activists inside Laos, there are many young people now. Obviously we had Sombath Somphone, who was a leading civil society figure for the Lao movement, and especially for the economic and development of the country, for the work on sustainable development. But talking about human rights inside Laos is not allowed. You know that civil society not necessarily use the word human rights when they work inside Laos. They are only allowed to use the SDGs when they want to talk about human rights, or when they are trying to engage with UN human rights reviews. But the work on human rights is very, very limited. After Sombath, what happened is that you had trends of Lao people there were Lao people moving to Thailand already for economic purpose. So Lao migrant workers working here in Thailand, who formed what we call the Free Lao movement. And the Free Lao movement is the Free Laos movement, the Free Laos group. It's a group of Lao migrant workers who gathered together and who decided to advocate and denounce the current authoritarian regime in Laos, and who were advocating for democracy in Laos, but from Thailand. So they became, I would say, the first target of the Lao government, right? They became the voice of the Lao people, they became the dissenting voices outside of Laos. So they became a prominent target of the Lao government. Some of them decided to hold a protest in 2015 in front of the Lao embassy, and as a result of that, several of them have been followed, and several of them have faced transnational repression, which means being followed by security forces. And when I'm talking about security forces, I'm talking about Thai security, working hand in hand with Lao authorities, following Lao activists here in Thailand, giving information to the Lao government, keeping track on them, engaging with them online, line application, because everybody uses line here. So it's been challenging for us working with activists, because there was this need to explain to them not to use line, to move to encrypted app messages. The thing is, while they are being followed by Thai authorities, they are being told by those Thai security officers are providing them with a kind of protection. So this is the irony of transnational repression in Thailand, is that those Thai security officers are getting in touch with our activists, making them believe that by staying in touch with them, they're going to be protected. But what happens is that by keeping in touch with them, they disappear. And so that's the case of Otsayavong. Otsayavong, who disappeared in August 2019. He was a founding member of the Lao Free movement, or the Lao Free group. He had met with him and his friends. They had met with the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights in March 2019, so a few months before his disappearance. Also, he was preparing a protest, because in September 2019, the ASEAN People's Forum was held in Thailand. So prior to the ASEAN People's Forum, he was preparing a protest, and he wanted to protest for Lao democracy. He was obviously being followed. He was obviously being followed closely by the Thai security, and they knew what he was preparing, and obviously informing as well the Lao government. As a result of him meeting with the UN Special Rapporteur a few months before, and him preparing a protest in September 2019, he disappeared before that. So on 26 August 2019, he left his apartment, and since then, nobody heard about him, and his whereabouts remain unknown. So in addition to ODD, after ODD, it was obviously very important to relocate a series of Lao activists who were also a member of the Free Laos group. So some of them have been relocated, and some of them decided to stay in Thailand. For those who decided to stay in Thailand, they are facing the same thing. They're also facing transnational repression. And then COVID hit. So when COVID hit, we thought, the Thai security and the Lao government are going to give a rest to those activists, and they're not going to monitor them again. So during COVID, we had, a period of where people were able to breathe. But I would say just before COVID, I forgot the case of Sombath Somphone. Like 1 month after Otsayavong disappeared, one of his roommates was arrested in Laos in September 2019 when he went back to Laos. There were also 3 Lao activists who were arrested when they went back to redo their passport after they protested in front of the embassy, and they were arrested in 2016. And they faced a very fast trial, so they didn't enjoy a free and fair trial, and they are now in jail, and they had to feel guilty. And so this is the case of Lao migrant workers going back to Laos, trying to do their passport, or going back to visit their families. They get arrested, or they disappear. For the case of Pit Bhutan, we still don't know where he is. He disappeared in September 2019. So then COVID hit, and then post-COVID, things came back again. We just before COVID, we also had the case of Mue that Shui Meng talked about. Mue is a woman human rights defender who, through social media, was actively denouncing the Lao government corruption and the government inaction. As Manushaya Foundation, we are a feminist human rights organization, and we legally represent Mue in front of the United Nations. So we have submitted complaints for her case to the United Nations. And we also were able to submit a complaint to the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. And the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention ruled in May 2021 that Mue detention is arbitrary. So there is, I would say, international jurisprudence in favor of Lao activists. You know, you have UN special rapporteurs that have pronounced themselves and made a lot of noise when it comes to the case of Sombath and to the case of the activists that I just mentioned that have disappeared, who are facing repression in Laos or are being put in jail. But yet, it seems that the Lao government can enjoy impunity, although it's being held into account by the United Nations. Post-COVID, we had the case of Savang, who disappeared in April, on 20 April 2022, and he reappeared suddenly a few months ago. But we also have two important cases. We have the case of Jack, of course, who faced an attempted murder on 29 April. And so it was a journey for us working closely with the UN and other important agencies to get him out of the country. Because the Lao government was keeping him in a public hospital, he was shot here at his jaw and a ball also in his lung. So he was about to die if nothing was done to get him out of the country. He was put in a public hospital, and the Lao government was not providing him with any medical support. So basically, he was led to die. So it was really important for the international community to support us to get him out of Laos and to relocate him to a safe place where he was able to medically recover, and he's kept now in a safe location. Kept in a safe location because of transnational repression of the Lao government. Transnational repression of the Lao government happens in the Mekong region, in particular in Thailand, but also abroad. We have another case of a Lao activist. His name is Joseph Akaravong, who was hiding in Thailand from 2019 until March 2022, until we were able to relocate him in France. He was denouncing the Lao Dam collapse, and he was denouncing on social media the corruption of the Lao government and the malfunction and the bad construction of the Lao Dam in Atapu that collapsed in July 2018. As a result of that, he had to flee Laos, and when he was in Thailand, we had to hide him, but he was facing constant transnational repression. So it's not only him being followed by the Thai security, it's also Manushaya team members that are being followed by the Thai security. So transnational repression is real, but we don't talk about it enough. Now that Joseph is relocated in France, the Lao government is routinely and consistently talking about him to Lao youth, because there's this worry and huge concern by the Lao government that Lao youth are not scared of the government anymore. And we saw it with the case of Jack speaking, using his social media, his Facebook platform to speak the truth. But Jack is not alone. There are many other young people in Laos that have social media pages that are denouncing the Lao government inaction and the Lao government corruption, and in particular the inflation and the reason why they are moving to Thailand. What we are very worried about is the extent to which the transnational repression of the Lao government is happening. In the case of Joseph in France, we know that the Lao government is routinely warning Lao people, telling them not to listen to Joseph and telling them that he will be found in France. Just 2 weeks ago, we received information from law students at the Lao National Law University sending us recording of Lao authorities going to the law school and basically doing propaganda and brainwashing students, telling them not to use social media, not to read any reports that are coming out from NGOs that are submitting reports to the UN for the CEDAW review and the review on women's rights and on economic, social, and rights of Laos, and not to listen to Joseph, and that they will find him in France. So we receive those information, by youth who are obviously worried that the Lao government is trying to brainwash them more and more. But thanks to social media, Lao youth are not stupid. And I have strong belief and faith that Lao youth will be the ones starting a new movement. They have been inspired by the Thai democracy movement. They are being inspired by what they are seeing in Hong Kong as well. They don't want to stay silent, although they realize that they can lose their life because of that. But you need to understand that there's no other choice, because the UN system is not working, right? We are 75th year of the UADHR, the international justice system, treaty body reviews, and any other system do not work in Laos. The Lao government is being held into account by the United Nations system, but they do not care. And the worst is that they're going to present themselves at the Human Rights Council next year. They're going to present the candidacy to be part of the UN Human Rights Council next year. So it's a joke, for us human rights activists working on the ground. We are like, wow, we are doing all this work, working closely with the UN, and Laura will speak after me, and she's working so hard on Laos. But what do we get from the Lao government? Lies. And I think there's an important role to play also by donors and the diplomatic community. I think it's nice for the diplomatic community to support us behind the scene. We want them to support us publicly, and not just when there are UN human rights reviews. We want donors to hold the Lao government into account, for real. It's not normal that the German government or the EU or Australia are pouring millions of dollars in Laos for development, for reforming the judicial system. They have been doing that for years. We haven't seen any change. There have been years and years of rule of law projects by UNDP, years of judicial system reform, or translation of the penal code, or translation of UN human rights treaties. We haven't seen any change. So I think it's really important for us to not only hold the Lao government to account through the UN system, but I think we have reached a limitation here. 75 years of the UDHR, and the Lao government is just not caring at all about it. We also have fears for us working on the ground in Laos. We work with people inside, we work with people outside, we go back and forth. I have a French citizenship that protects me when I'm going there, but how long is it going to protect me, right? My family is still inside. I still have a lot of family members in Laos. So for us, we are such a small number of people working in Laos that every day we have to make the decision. Am I going to take the risk to publish this report? Am I going to take the risk to just come here and speak to you at the FCCT? Am I going to take the risk to issue a statement? Are we going to take the risk to submit another UN complaint? We take the risk, because if we don't do it, who is going to do it? And even when we do it, who truly cares? You are FCCT members, so you come to this event because you see it's an FCCT event. But how much do you really care about Laos if it was not an FCCT event? So that's a question I always ask people. I also have people telling me, where is Laos? Are you talking about Lagos? So I'm like, no, I'm talking about Laos in Southeast Asia. It's next to Thailand. So I think there's a real lack of awareness about what's happening in Laos. There is complacence by the international community supporting the Lao government, always trying to find an entry point to build the capacity, always to find an entry point to work with them, pouring funding into them. But then we have the case of Jack. And when the case of Jack happens, everything has to happen behind the door, because nobody wants to be seen as helping Jack when it comes to the international community. What are we going to tell young people like Jack? Are we going to tell, and that's something that Debbie, who is in the room, was the first one to tell me. She told me, what are we going to tell young people like Jack? Are we going to tell them next time you are going to lobby, or next time you are going to denounce something about the Lao government? Are we going to tell young people to make sure that if they are taking a risk, they must take risks within the budget that international donors can give us to save their lives? Is that what we're going to tell young people? That the UN cannot do anything for them? That international donors cannot release funds right away to help them escape because there's donors restriction? Because they can only give $2,000 when someone needs $70,000 to be saved at the hospital? But at the same time, you have millions of dollars that are being poured in Laos. So I think there is a huge dissonance here between the support that the Lao government is getting, while obviously violating the rights of Lao people and of defenders, and the little support that we are getting here to basically bring democracy back in Laos. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. Very comprehensive, very heartfelt. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Kun Angkana Nilapejit. Angkana is a member of the UN Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances, so it's very timely that she's here in that capacity, as well as a former commissioner of the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand. She's also the wife of Somchai Nilapejit, who is a renowned lawyer who was enforcibly disappeared in Thailand 19 years ago. And in fact, March 12th, 2024 will mark the 20th anniversary of the enforced disappearance off the streets of Bangkok of her husband, Somchai Nilapejit. And she's still searching for answers as well. So she has a lot of perspectives on this, I think, not only from knowing and working so closely with Shui Meng on her case for so many years, but also her own cases and what is going on in the region as well. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Bill, and good evening, everyone, and especially to P. Xiuming. I'm here today once again on the 11th anniversary of Sombath Somphone. In each year, I'm here in my various positions as a friend of Xiuming, as a victims of enforced disappearance, or as the commissioner of National Human Rights Commission Thailand, and now as the members of the UN Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearance. Time flies, and this year is 11th anniversary that Sombath Somphone disappeared. 11 years may seem swift for ordinary people, but for U Xiuming and her family, who have been waiting for Sombath's return, it has been a prolonged period of heartbreak and nightmares. As a son of a farmer, Sombath has tirelessly dedicated himself to addressing the adverse human rights impact of business activities, as Xiuming mentioned earlier. He advocated for the welfare of rural communities and victims of land confiscation. His enforced disappearance has a chilling effect on civil society and other human rights defenders in the country and also in our region. As we are aware, ASEAN is a highly diverse region with variations in geopolitics, historical backgrounds, traditions, attitudes, religions, and narratives. Notably, it stands out of the only major region that lacked of a comprehensive regional human rights mechanism, such as Human Rights Court, Commission, or any other framework that extends across the entire region. As a representative from Asia and the Pacific of the United Nations Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances, I would like to bring your attention the issue of enforced disappearances in the region. The working group had registered numerous cases of enforced disappearances in ASEAN. However, the working group believes that the cases we received present only the tip of the iceberg. Over the last year, the working group reviewed several cases of alleged abduction and forced return of Chinese human rights activists in Southeast Asia, notably around the Mekong sub-region. The working group had raised concern about this ever-increasing practice repeatedly. The working group regularly urged ASEAN governments to act in due diligence and to fully abide by the international standards on transnational transfers laid out by the report of the working group in 2021. The working group believes that cases of enforced disappearance in Mekong sub-region are significantly underreported and persist in the present time. Various factors contribute to this issue, such as lack of awareness, impunity, weak administration of justice, silencing of families and civil society, and the absence of a regional mechanism for independent investigation. Poverty is one of the barriers for the victim's family to access justice, as impoverished people may not seek justice because they cannot afford the cost of legal advice, administrative fees, and other costs. In addition, those living in poverty may fear of reprisal or sanction from more powerful actors and may not seek justice because of this fear and because of discriminatory practices by the authorities. These factors contribute to the pattern of impunity which often surrounds enforced disappearances, which contributes to their future recurrence because there is no fear or accountability. The working group is particularly concerned about instances of pressure, stress, and intimidation on the families or on the organizations and lawyers who are working on their behalf not to file or to drop their complaints related to enforced disappearances. The work of civil society organizations in the region is particularly important to raise awareness about the existence of this horrendous practice and call for the right to the truth of the families as well as the accountability of the perpetrators. Since 2012, the working group has contributed to 10 communications on Lao PDR. Most of them relate to enforced disappearances of human rights defenders. The working group has taken the lead mandate in 2 of these communications. However, despite these efforts, the working group regrets that Lao government has responded to only 1 of the recommendations. This year, 2024, this is very meaningful as Lao PDR will be chair of ASEAN in January. I urge authorities to conduct a comprehensive investigation into the case of Sombath Somphone and all other cases of enforced disappearance in Lao PDR. It is crucial to actively search for disappeared persons, prosecute the perpetrators of this crime, provide appropriate redress, particularly psychological remedies, for the harm suffered by victims and their relatives, and ensure of non-reprisal. I would like to emphasize that the working group stands ready to support the Lao government through the technical assistance. In September last year and in April and May this year, the working group conducted an online training session with representatives of Lao government. Last year, on the 10th anniversary of the enforced disappearance of Sombath Somphone, the working group issued a press release jointly with other special procedure mandate holders, urging the authorities to effectively search and thoroughly investigate all cases of enforced disappearance. The mandate holder reiterated their call upon Laotian authorities to request international assistance and refrain from undertaking any measures that would violate the spirit and purpose of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance that signed it by Lao government in 2008. I have some recommendations to Lao PDR and ASEAN member states. First, Lao and ASEAN member states should contemplate the acceptance of country visits requested by the working group and other mandate holders. Secondly, ASEAN should make diligent efforts to encourage ASEAN member states to ratify the International Convention on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. and other relevant treaties such as the Convention Against Torture, the ICCPR, and the Refugee Convention 1951. Thirdly, ASEAN National Human Rights Institution, or CNF, should remain dedicated to upholding the Paris principles with a strong emphasis on their independence and effectiveness. CNF should commit to protecting the rights of the ASEAN citizens by conducting investigation and providing remedies of victims of human rights violation, especially enforced disappearance within the region. Fourth, the Lao government should lead all efforts against enforced disappearances and transnational transfers or forced return of individuals deemed to be at least in the region. Additionally, the Lao government should consider hosting a session of the working group in Lao PDR in 2025, marking a significant step towards showcasing its full commitment to protecting the rights of victims of enforced disappearances. Last but not least, on every anniversary of Sombath Somphone disappearance, as a victim of enforced disappearance, my heart is heavy as I stand in solidarity with Sombath family, calling for truth and justice. I share the belief echoed by Ming that one day the truth will come and Sombath to return. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ankana. And we look forward to helping you also demand justice for your husband as well as the 20th anniversary comes up. As people know, that happened during the period of the prime ministership of Thaksin Shinawatra, who actually said at the time, shortly afterwards, that he knew a lot more about the case than he was letting on. So maybe when he's released from prison, he can start talking some. Next, we're going to hear from Laura Machini. She is a human rights officer of the regional office of the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights based here in Bangkok. She's actually been working for 12 years for the High Commissioner's office in a number of different places, including Cambodia, Central Asia, and also on the Commission of Inquiry on Syria, which is very hard work, one that Dr. Vitit Muntabon from Thailand was also involved with. She's actually been working for UN agencies since 2004 and been far-flung places like Libya, Afghanistan, and Bosnia. So now it's on to Laos, where she just got back this evening. We were worried that she wasn't going to get back in time because there was a flight delay, but she did. So, Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Phil, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's very difficult to come after these very inspirational speeches by the strong co-panelists. I'll try not to bore you too much, and it's going to be very difficult. So we heard quite a bit about individual cases from Laos and other countries in Southeast Asia. And I think I'd like to zoom out a little bit from the country context and to look at Southeast Asia a bit broadly, but also to contextualize the crime of enforced disappearance that we have heard a lot so far, and look at what international law says actually about enforced disappearances and what are the state responsibilities to prevent enforced disappearance and of course to offer redress to victims and families of the victims, and what are their rights at stake. So an enforced disappearance is defined by international human rights law as an arrest, detention, or abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state or by persons or groups of persons acting with authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state, followed by the refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or by the concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the disappeared person, placing them de facto outside the protection of the law. So there are cases, for example, where a prolonged period of incommunicado detention may amount to also enforced disappearance, because the person that is being detained and without any information shared with the families or with their lawyer is de facto placed in a state of enforced disappearance. The enforced disappearance of persons violates a range of human rights that are embodied in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we heard of, is the 75th anniversary this year, and they are set out in other instruments and laws, in particularly the 1992 Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, which is the basis on which the working group on enforced disappearances is actually working, and the subsequent 2006 International Convention on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. This international convention, called the CED in short, was actually adopted by the General Assembly in 2006 with the specific aim to strengthen the international criminal and human rights framework to protect individuals from this heinous crime of enforced disappearance. And the convention provides that nobody shall ever be subject to an action of enforced disappearance without any exception, even in times of war. So that applies equally in times of war and times of peace, and underlines that enforced disappearances constitute a crime against humanity whenever they are practiced in a widespread or systematic manner. So the victims of enforced disappearances, having been removed from the protection of the law and disappeared from society, are deprived of all of their basic rights, and among others, and particularly the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, the right not to be subjected to torture, and the right to recognition of the person before the law. I'd like to stress, actually, also that enforced disappearance, by its very nature, takes an extremely emotional toll on the families of the victims, who remain unaware of the fates of their loved ones, searching for answers and waiting for news that may never come. And I think we have heard quite a lot tonight, very touching statements from Shui Meng and Ankana about how families actually become victims of these crimes as well. And this particularly for this very reason, and recognizing the unique and severe psychological, physical, and too often also financial strain that is imposed on the family members of the disappeared persons, that Article 24 of the Convention on Enforced Disappearances includes in the definition of victim not just a disappeared person, but also any individual who has suffered harm as a direct result of the enforced disappearance, such as, for example, family members and friends as well. As such, the victims can be spouses, partners, parents, sons, daughters, friends of the disappeared, who are deprived of both the truth, of course, and are forced to live in a limbo for many years of uncertainty and fear, which the Working Group on Enforced Disappearances has actually found reaching the threshold of torture itself. Enforced disappearances disrupt family structure and can cause disproportionate gender and generational harms on women and children. For them, the economic and social impacts add to the already immense suffering that the disappearance of a husband or a father entails. Relatives, together with their lawyers and civil society organizations supporting the families in the search for the truth and justice, may also be subject to reprisals in the form of arbitrary arrest, harassment, threat, which further obstructs the public knowledge on the cases of enforced disappearances and contribute to make them invisible. And also about this, we have heard several examples of how this so-called chilling effect spreads in the societies where enforced disappearances are practiced in Laos, but also across other countries of Southeast Asia. It makes it very difficult for other civil society to come forward with cases, or relatives or family members to come forward with cases. And that's why Ankana mentioned rightfully that probably the cases that are reported to the working group are really the tip of the iceberg only. There's probably much more that is unreported. Enforced disappearances are sadly a regular global phenomenon In Southeast Asia, this practice has traditionally been used by state as a means to silencing political opponents or critical voices, and individuals have been targeted for exercising the fundamental rights to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. And victims have included human rights defenders, environmental defenders, social and political activists, development workers, government critics, lawyers, and journalists. And over the past decades, there have been deeply worrisome trends also in relation to the number of enforced disappearances occurring in the context of counterterrorism activities, and in particularly on the so-called war on drugs. And indeed, enforced disappearances has frequently been used to spread fear and send strong messages to other individuals who courageously raise their voice on critical issues of public interest and concern. And the feeling of insecurity that is generated by this practice is not limited to the close relative of the disappeared, but affects their communities and the society as a whole. So HCHR, the office in Southeast Asia, has also noted with concern that, of course, far too many cases of enforced disappearance in the region have remained unsolved, such as, of course, the case of Sombath and others that we heard, and only one country in the region, Cambodia, has ratified the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. And the lack of treaty ratification and relevant criminal domestic legislation and the overall absence of a political will to address these acts of enforced disappearances have resulted in long-standing and widespread impunity for perpetrators of enforced disappearances that grossly undermines the ability of victims to obtain truth, justice, and to seek reparations. Most states in the region have yet to adopt any domestic legislation that meets international standards. Sorry. Nor have there been appropriate domestic institutional mechanisms established to ensure the transparent and effective investigation of these cases. And this has too often resulted in victims of enforced disappearances and their family not being guaranteed a series of basic rights they're entitled to, in particular the right to know the truth about the circumstances of the enforced disappearance, the progress and the results of investigation, and the fate of the disappeared person, and the right to obtain what is called reparation in the form of restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantee of non-repetition, and prompt, fair, and adequate compensation. It should be noted also that there are a number of countries in Southeast Asia, including Laos, for example, Indonesia, and Thailand, that have signed but not yet ratified this convention. While not legally binding at this stage, because it's not yet been ratified, when a country signs a treaty, they are basically signaling their willingness to establish an expectation that they will act in compliance with the spirits of the provisions and would refrain from any actions that may defeat the object and the purpose of the treaty prior to its entry into force. And clearly, some of these expectations have not been met, obviously, as we heard several cases even taking place in countries that have signed, although not yet ratified, the convention. I'd like to also just mention one positive development, or one step in the right direction at least, which is from Thailand, of course, the long-awaited Prevention and Suppression of Torture and Enforced Disappearance Act finally entered into force in February of this year, following long years of advocacy by many stakeholders, including civil society and our office as well, and the family of the victims. It was an extremely long journey for many, especially for those who are yet to know the fate and the whereabouts of their loved ones. With this act, victims and families of involuntary and enforced disappearances have a new framework in place to seek some form of legal redress and to hold perpetrators of this crime to account. Having said that, Thailand still has a long way to go. It still has over 70 cases, I think, pending with the working group on enforced and involuntary disappearance that remain unresolved. And there are some critical gaps in the Act, particularly in relation to the provision concerning the application of amnesty for offenses under the Act and some others. So there is a need still for the government of Thailand to amend some provision of the act to ensure that it's fully compliant with international human rights law, but at least is a step in the right direction, which is not that common in the region. And of course, the UN Human Rights Office and many others are working closely with the Minister of Justice and other authorities in Thailand to make sure that this act is amended accordingly. Last also positive development that is worth mentioning is that on the 10th of December, as we mentioned, it marked the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and there was an high-level event on 11 and 12 of December, including in Geneva, but including in Bangkok, where member states could make some pledges, human rights pledges, and Thailand pledged to ratify the International Convention on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance by 2024, and provide human rights education and training for government officials. So these are good entry points that we have in Thailand to ensure that prevention and combating of torture and enforced disappearance take some steps in the positive direction, and serve also hopefully as an example for other countries in Southeast Asia and in the region. Just to close, I would like to say a few words to remember Sombath and other victims of enforced disappearances. OHCHR and the working group on enforced disappearances and other special procedures of the UN Human Rights Council have continuously and regularly engaged over the past year with the government of Laos and, of course, with the families of the victims. However, there has been no progress whatsoever in the investigation into the case, leaving the families without the possibility of true justice and redress. As international law requires, the states launch immediate, thorough, and impartial investigations that are in line with international legal standards to determine the fate and whereabouts of those who have been disappeared and to bring perpetrators to justice. I would also like to say that from our side, we will continue our advocacy in that direction, and we do encourage civil society organizations, defenders, and any other stakeholders to document and submit their cases to the UN Office of the High Commissioner, to special procedures, independent experts such as the Working Group on Enforced Disappearance. And I'd like to stress that, as it was mentioned already, the documentation is crucial, even if sometimes the feeling is that, albeit all of the documentation and the public statements, nothing is changing, but it's still very important that the truth of the victims, of the family of the victims, is recorded and properly documented. I think I'll leave it at this. Thank you very much for having me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are all really very comprehensive and effective presentations from different viewpoints, and really quite helpful in sort of illuminating the issues, not only in Laos, but I think also in the sort of greater Mekong subregion. We've got time for probably about a couple questions, so I'm going to open the floor. We have a microphone at the back. If you wish to ask a question, please state your name. State your affiliation, if any, and let us know who you're actually directing the question towards. So the floor is open. You need to go to the mic. No, you need to go to the mic. Sorry. No, I mean, we've got someone online from Vientiane, so I mean, they've got to...
Thank you all very much. I've learned quite a bit tonight, and I've been really interested in these issues, especially I've been reading about Chinese citizens disappearing in Cambodia. I've read about the Chinese that were kidnapped, brought into Myanmar, and we're working on scams, and that's happening in Laos now, isn't it also? To move on, my question is, has there been any successful ending? Have any of these people been found? Have you learned specifically for a fact what happened to any of the people that have disappeared?
Yeah. Okay. Can you say who you are, by the way?
Oh, I'm Erin Lee.
Okay.
I'm a expat.
Okay. So successful outcomes, or something that would constitute something towards that.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, there are many pending cases with the working group, and for some of them, I think we can say they are resolved in the sense that the whereabouts were identified.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the person is free. You know, sometimes they have been identified, the whereabouts, but they are detained, for example. So
Are they alive, or have they been killed, or?
Well, for the ones that are still alive, in several cases, in most cases, I would say they are in detention in the countries of origin. So yes, the case has been resolved in the sense that whereabouts have been identified, but they are being detained. So you mentioned some Chinese, but others as well, Vietnamese as well. So there has been several cases, and many cases, and Ankana may want to add on this from the working group, have not been resolved.
Yes, the transnational transfer is very concerned by the working group because when we receive the complaint from the victims or their colleagues or families, and then we send the communication to the countries concerned, and we copy another country that he or she were abducted, and sometimes we find that some of the victims reappear in neighboring countries, but for some maybe we didn't heard anything, but we always follow up with the countries concerned in each year. In our session meeting, we will consider all the cases again and again, and we not give up, and we will always asking for more information from the families or colleagues or the lawyers, because we are very concerned of reprisal, that the family or lawyer might be received when they communicate with us.
Do you have access, or I'm sorry to follow up on that? Is there anyone in your organization, in any of your organizations or others, that have had access to some of these people who've been found imprisoned in other places other than war zones, obviously?
For the working group, we ask for country visit in all the countries in origin. But unfortunately, that we not allow from Asian countries to visit. But we never give up. We ask Thailand maybe more than a couple of times, Laos also, Cambodia, in all the countries. Because I think that if we receive an opportunity for the visit, and we can visit the detention facilities, we can have a meeting with all stakeholders, including the victims and their family. We can ask for a meeting with the judges, the court, so that we can give the good recommendation. And as I mentioned earlier, that next year, actually the working group will have 3 session meetings per year, and 1 session will be out of Geneva. And for 2025, we plan to have a session in ASEAN. We ask the Thai government, also Indonesia, as the office of ASEAN, and also the Laos PDR, if we can have a session meeting in ASEAN countries. I think it's a good opportunity that we can also have a meeting with the state authorities and also the people, the victims. We often try our best.
Thank you.
Shuang, do you want to add anything? If you want anything, just interject. No, Shui Meng, I'm saying.
Thank you. I think Emily already pointed out quite clearly how ineffective international pressures and including the UN system has to governments who stubbornly ignore their obligations to share information about the status of the victims of enforced disappearance. And it is really a struggle, uphill struggle. But at the same time, I think it has to continue. It has to continue for the UN system, for the UPR process, for the working group on involuntary disappearance, to continue to ask the governments to demand for answers, even though many of their requests are just ignored, and many of the appeals are not addressed. We have no other ways. We have no choice. As victims of enforced disappearance, the only avenue open to us is to use international advocacy and also the struggle of the defenders themselves. I am particularly encouraged by the remarks of Emily, who stated that there are young Lao who are working hard in Thailand and also inside this country, even though their voices are seldom heard, and their actions have to take time. Thank you.
Marwan?
Yeah, Marwan Markan, Nikkei Asia. My question is to Emily. You talked about something that Shriman just referred to about growing voices in the country, challenge the establishment. How much of that is limited to the urban areas and how much of it is spread out into the rural section? And given that Laos takes over as a chair of ASEAN January next year, I'm sure this must be a cause of concern for the Laotian government. Do you think they'll expect more intelligence and surveillance from China to restrict even a whiff of discontent from the very people that you've been following and monitoring? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Marwan. That's a great question because I did not touch on China and the Chinese influence on Lao politics, but Lao people, we said that Laos has become a China colony. And that's what young people are denouncing on social media. It's how heavily Laos has become, a colony of China, how the Chinese government is politically and economically highly influencing what's happening inside Laos. So what young people are denouncing is basically the Chinese influence. When we talk about the case of Jack, at first we thought it was just the Lao government. We thought it was just the Lao government going after him. But then we thought, that our government tend to abduct people. Like people disappear. We don't see the body anymore. But in the case of Jack, they tried to kill him. But at the same time, we were also confused because 2.5 weeks after Jack was shot, Boon Swan was killed in Ubon Ratchathani in Thailand. He was also a Lao activist from the Free Lao movement. So then we were like, okay, it can be two options for the case of Jack. It's either a Chinese person who was paid to kill him, or maybe someone paid by China, or is the Lao government hand in hand with China. And then when we look at the case of Boon Swan, we're like, he's been killed. He hasn't been abducted, whereas the other Lao activists are usually disappearing. So then we thought, okay, it might be because of the new Lao prime minister. There's Somsaisi Pandon who just took office in December 2022. The prime minister before him was very disappointing for the Lao government because he let people voice their concern on social media. He let people voice their concern throughout the summer 2022 about the inflation. He let young people raising their voices more and more. So when he resigned and the new prime minister took office, one of his objectives was to crack down on dissenting voice, was to control online freedom. And so it was very clear. We are seeing it with the different tries that they have done with the Ministry of Telecommunication, how they are warning young people and how they are threatening young people to not use social media, how they are telling young people they're going to go after young people who are using social media to criticize the government and who are also criticizing China, and how they are going to go after those who are posting from abroad. So I think at this stage is the Lao government not understanding that they have no sovereignty over people outside of Laos. And so is the Lao government really threatening young people and trying to stop them to voice their concern? The young people that we are mainly in touch with and working with are from the capital. They are not from rural areas. well, I would say those for who we are in touch with are also online. So for some of them, we don't know where they are. We just know that they're all part of the same group. They can be anywhere in the country, but because of the level of education and of the way they express themselves, we believe that most of them are from the capital. Obviously, everything is very secured, everything is very encrypted. We cannot say who they are, but without them, it will be difficult for us to do our work because most of the information that we send to the UN, and as Laura said, documentation is very important. Although we are very tired, that's the only way out that we have, right? That we keep sending information to OSCHR, to Laura, to UN special procedures. Laos will be reviewed on economic, social, and cultural rights next year. Laos will be reviewed on women's rights next year. Laos will go through the 4th UPR cycle next year. So everything is going to happen in 2025. Prior to that, we had to do some initial lobbying. So next year, you will see a lot of us talking about Laos, submitting reports about Laos, but most of the things that we submit, it's because we get information from inside. Young people, as I'm saying, they're being inspired by the Military Alliance. They have access to internet. They have access to all the things that what the previous generation could not have access to. They want true democracy. They don't want the democracy that I would say my mother's generation want, which is a constitutional monarchy, like they still want the king back, kind of. And so these are the people that you can see wearing the 3-head elephants flag. The people I'm talking about, the new generation, is not wearing that flag. They want true democracy. They want democracy on the terms that we understand it, on the terms that the UN understands it, that in the terms of international human rights standards. And so those young people are not being influenced by former Lao generations. They're not being influenced by the diaspora. They are being influenced by what they see happening in the country. So China taking over the country. They are seeing Lao people having the land being grabbed so that the government can concede the land to Chinese investors, because nobody owned the land in Laos. Under the Lao law, the whole land in the country is being owned by the government. So at any time you can lose your land and the government can concede the land to Chinese investors. And so they are seeing all these inequalities. They are seeing a lot of young people crossing the border to come work in Thailand. I'm sure that if you, every time I go to restaurants or I go to services in Thailand, most of the people I'm speaking with are from Laos now. So it's easy for me because we speak the same language, but most of them are from Laos now. So it's obviously the domestic workers and the taxi drivers, a lot of them were already from ASEAN and Laos. But now if you go to shops and stores and restaurants, you will see more Lao people in Thailand. So I would say we have a concern, obviously, that the repression will increase because of ASEAN chairmanship. The new Prime Minister has been very clear that he wants to be in control of the situation, of the political situation before Laos takes chairmanship of the ASEAN. We are worried because we know that Japan is going to pour millions of dollars to support the Lao government to become the chairman of the ASEAN. So we are worried about that. And also because Japan will celebrate the 75th year anniversary of diplomatic relationship between Laos and Japan. So that's a concern for us. So I think from our side, we need support from the international community. We need support from journalists, from the media to make noise about it. Next year, Laos will be the chairman of ASEAN. It also means that the repression against youth inside the country will increase. ASEAN People's Forum is not going to take place in Laos for the security of human rights defenders. And so it's already sending you a huge red flag and warning that nobody is safe inside Laos. So imagine if people from the ASEAN don't want to go inside Laos because they don't feel safe, what is it for young people? So yes, we are concerned that repression will increase because of the ASEAN chairmanship.
I think we've got time for one or two more questions, if there are some.
Hello, good evening everyone. I'm Neeraj, affiliated to Indian Cultural Center. My question is directed to Emily, founder of Manushya Foundation, that throughout the presentation we have heard that there are problems with respect to enforced disappearances, and we have data also. But at what stage, like we have been collecting this data for last 10 years or 15 years, unless, so the first part of the problem is identifying the problem. That probably is at I mean, at a decent stage, and it's a great service from your organization. But what is the action part? In fact, if all three panelists can contribute to it, what is the action part of it? Knowing the problem is probably one part, but let's say if after 10 years from now we are still collecting data or probably not getting out to the solutions, or is there any other part of the world with similar cases of disappearances with same intensity, and we have been able to keep a check in that place? Similar solutions, can we look for that? So because all throughout the presentation, I think the problem part is more or less we are aware. It's about the solution. Anything concrete on ground that is happening, or is there any hope that we have in recent future? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very difficult question. One of the reasons why there's no investigation being done, I think Laura and Shui Meng and Kunankana already said it, is because of the lack of ratification of the convention. Now we know that Thailand is going to ratify now the Convention on Enforced Disappearance, but it's not something that Laos is going to do. And even if we submit complaints to the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearance, the complaints that we can submit are those for which the family has approved and give consent. So there are other cases where families don't want to give consent because they are so scared of giving consent to have the case put forward at the UN because they are scared of reprisals. So we are in the situation where we need to submit complaints, we need the consent of the family because we need an investigation to be done. But at the same time, when we have all those factors taken into account, when we submit the complaint, when the UN Working Group has issued an opinion, then you have silence from the government. They're not going to investigate impartially. Or they're going to tell you that they are doing investigation on their own terms. And their own terms is basically lying and hiding the truth. And on the other hand, you have families who don't want to give the consent. So we also explain to the families who don't want to give the consent that if they don't give the consent, they have 0% chances of knowing what happened to the member of the family that disappeared. So that's really, it's hard because it's a decision that you need to discuss with family members, those who want to give consent and those who don't want to give consent. And in ASEAN, I haven't seen any success story beside maybe one case in Thailand, which is the case of Billy. But I think Kunankana can talk about it more than me because she's been part of the groups who have been working heavily on enforced disappearance, and to have this law that passed in February 2023 of this year. Billy was a Karen indigenous leader, and he was the leader of the Karen community living in the Kekrashan National Park. And he was basically defending his land against forestry officers who were burning their houses because that the ancestral land became a national park. And also because Thailand wanted to make the national park an official UNESCO World Site Heritage. In 2021, UNESCO has declared that national park a World Site heritage, but at the same time, like Billy disappeared in 2024, on 17 April 2024, and for years we didn't know what happened to him. Civil society, his wife, did a lot of advocacy with DSI, with the Ministry of Justice, with the National Human Rights Commission, also with the UN, to investigate the case. And I think that's maybe one of the positive outcome that we had, is that it was found that actually he was killed. So I will let Ankana share more about this case because she's been working more on this case. But when you have good pressure and strong pressure by civil society and a lot of actors, ongoing pressure for several years, at some point you can have some answers. But again, it's still a sad answer. But for many others, you don't have. Sadly, you don't have answers.
If you're asking for the success story, I will raise the stories of the mothers in Argentina. I think it's very good lesson learned. But one thing that we should think beyond is the situation or the circumstance of democracy in the country. That I think is very important. In Argentina, the mothers of the disappeared came together, and finally they can force the government to find the fate and whereabouts of their loved one. I think it's very good lesson to learn about that. But when talking about ASEAN, I think that I learned a lot from the victims in many countries. The Sri Lanka mother is also very strong. It's very strong, and they're always fighting for justice for their sons or daughters. And each year, honestly, a lot of mothers passes away without knowing the truth and justice. I think it's very challenging. But one thing I would say is that enforced disappearance is continuous crime. The case will be declared only when we know the fate and whereabouts of the victims. Or not, he or she will be the disappeared person until we know what happened to them. I think this is very important. I want to raise about the example in Thailand. I would say that even now Thailand have the Anti-Torture and Enforced Disappearance Act. Honestly, it not come from the government. It's not the top down, but it is from the families. It's from the civil society. It's from all the victims that pushing together, so that the government have the good act to protect the people. I think that this is one thing that I think is very good lesson to learn. And for Billy case, as observed the case since the beginning when I'm the Human Rights Commissioner, I want to say that when the Department of Special Investigation tried to find the remains, and they found the fragmented of bone in the river. But it's against the search activity, the guideline of search activity of the Committee Against Enforced Disappearance. Because for search activity, we have to look for the person, not looking for the remain. Because when you search, when you're looking for the person, you will know the whole stories. But if you search for the remain, you will find some only fragmented of bone. For the case of Billy, the fragment of bone, the copper pieces of bone, identified by the mitochondria DNA testing. And the Department of Special Investigation said that the bone belonged to like mothers or grandmothers of Billy, but it not identified the person. So that's why the court dismissed the case recently. And now Billy still be the disappeared person because nobody know about his fate and whereabouts. And I don't know at the end if the Supreme Court dismissed the case. So Billy will come back to be the case of the disappear again. I often said that I often told the Ministry of Justice that if you want to conduct the investigation of the disappeared person, you should not work on the case at the homicide, but you should start investigate as the case of disappeared person and searching for the person, not searching for the remains, because you will go in the wrong way, and the truth will never come, so that the perpetrator will be free.
Okay. I want to give each of the panelists a sort of an opportunity to say a few last words, a couple of last thoughts about this very difficult but necessary conversation we've had about enforced disappearances and the need for accountability. Why don't I just start with Shui Meng, see if you have a few words you want to add, and then we'll just run according to the same order.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists, and you have walked with me on this difficult journey, and particularly Priyankana, who every year at every FCCT panel talking about Sombath will come and give her support and solidarity. As a victim, we have very little recourse, and we can only count on the support and solidarity of other victims as well as other human rights defenders. I don't know whether I will ever find Sombath. I may even move on and die before the case can be resolved. But I am convinced a lie is a lie, and truth will eventually triumph over lie. I have to hold on to this hope, and I thank you all for your attention, continued attention and support to the Sombath's case. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us from Vientiane. We appreciate it. Kunakana, any additional thoughts?
Thank you, Phil. I want to state on behalf of the victims, not only in Thailand, but maybe in the region I work with. I'm very optimist. I think the people who know me, they know that I'm very optimist and very tolerant to all the state authorities. And I would say that it's not easy for the victims, especially women, to fight for justice, because the women are the victims who left behind. And it's not only the wife or mothers, but the whole family that depend on. I think it's very challenging. But I think that when we fight for justice, from my experience, Emily knows that I often face so many kinds of threat, intimidation, and reprisal, and even the online bullying and harassment. But I never give up. I'm not the hero, but I never give up. I'm fighting every day with calm and patience, and I hope that one day it will change. And I would say that when Thailand have the Anti-Torture Act, Anti-Torture and Enforced Disappearance, is the victory of all the families, not only in Thailand, but I think in the region and all over the world, that try to strengthen the Thai government to have the law to protect all the people in Thailand, not only the Thai citizen, but all the people. So I think victim alone cannot do that. But we need support. We need support from all the civil society, the international communities. I think this is very meaningful to the victim, and please do your job. We not need the charity, donation, or whatever, but only one thing we cannot do is that the supportation, so that we can continue our struggle for truth and justice, and for the mechanism to prevent enforced disappearance. It's not only for the people who already disappear, but for all the people, for all the citizens, for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily, last thought?
Thank you so much. My last thought is the work that we do is very hard. I'm very inspired by women like Shui Meng and Kunankana for your strength and your courage. It gives it's an inspiration for us to continue the work. I think the word that I want us to keep in mind is solidarity. 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 We need you to stand with us in solidarity. We need you who have power to defer your power to those who need the solidarity. Most of the time, the solidarity is not on our terms. Solidarity is on the term of those who have power. And sometimes those who want to stand in solidarity with us decide how they will stand in solidarity with us. But solidarity should be on our own terms. And so I'm really asking all of you to stand in solidarity with us in our struggle for democracy in Laos, in our struggle to find the truth on the fate of Sombath and others who have disappeared. Really, please defer your power to those who are asking for solidarity, and ask us how you can help us so that we can together find justice and fight for democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. last word.
Thank you. I think I'll just close by paying tribute to these three amazing women tonight, Shimeng, Ankana, and Emily, of course, for their strength, courage, and perseverance. And I think it's because of people like them that we are here tonight talking about these personal stories, the stories, the histories of these countries and their journey towards democracy. And I think, as you, Emily, said, this is inspirational for many of us, for me, surely. And from my side, I can, of course, offer my solidarity, as I have done so far, and I continue to do, to Emily and others working in, on the search for their loved ones. Thank you.
Yeah. And taking off my FCCT board hat, I'll say that Human Rights Watch will continue to stand with you all the way through. I would like to thank the panelists for joining us today. Thank you, Shui Meng, for calling in from Vientiane. I know you're taking a trip tomorrow, so safe trip. This recording of this event will be on the FCCT YouTube account. Our channel actually has most of the various different panels that are presented at the FCCT. So if you haven't looked at the FCCT YouTube channel, there's a lot of gems there that you could be watching. And I would encourage you also, if you've been impressed, as I have been today, with what I've heard, please share the video that will come out tomorrow on our channel. And also, let me finally close by saying that for those of you who want to come and visit us tomorrow, please do. As I mentioned, there's going to be a panel on LGBT rights and marriage equality, the very strong likelihood that Thailand may move forward to become the first country in Southeast Asia to guarantee real marriage equality for LGBT persons. We're going to have a star-studded panel of parliamentarians and others here to talk about actually what is happening and probably what actually happened at the parliament tomorrow. So it will be very exciting. It starts at 7 p.m. Thank you, and good night from the FCCT.